Hello everyone and welcome to Zach's Garage. Now last week we were reviewing the Peel. Now we're doing a side-by-side comparison of our old Agera R and our new Koenigsegg Regera. So without further ado, let's get to it. So in 2011 the Koenigsegg Agera range had been running, but the newest car to feature would be this, the Agera R, with the flex fuel system, an updated triplex suspension and a few other tweaks to body styling and performance. It was something that revolutionised the way Koenigsegg were going. Now the reason for this was very simple. It was a hybrid between the 1-to-1 and the previous Agera and CCX range. It meant they had the comfort of the Agera and CCX, but some of the rawness and aggression of the 1-to-1. So only 4 years later this was released in 2015 in the same building in Geneva, and look how far they've come. This utilises a hybrid drivetrain with 1700 horsepower. This is a standard, well, I say standard, I don't think you could call it standard, after all it is a Koenigsegg, but it uses a traditional V8 produced by Koenigsegg with twin turbochargers producing 1120 brake horsepower. Now you may be thinking, well, if that's 1700 and that's 1100, the differencing can't be too similar. Well, you couldn't be further from the truth. That is how I would describe as a hammer. That is what I describe as a nail. This you get in knowing what you're going to experience. You know that you're going to be thrown around, you know the gearbox is going to be clunky, and you know that by the end of it, you're going to have a smile on your face. But you'd also probably have a sore back if you drove it to the south of France in one go. Whereas with this you could hop in and you haven't got the aggression, but you do have the thrill of the acceleration and the top speed and the general usability, as it uses the free valve and also the what they call Koenigsegg direct drive. It means that it only has one gear instead of a gearbox, which means it's ultimately smooth. And believe me, this thing on the road is the most comfortable thing. It's like a Rolls-Royce, but with 1700 brake horsepower, and is the fastest thing to 250 mile an hour and back to zero in the world. So let's get into some of the performance bits before we start getting into the aesthetics. Now to talk about performance, we need to get to the engine bay. And well, on this one it's a bit boring. You have to open the door like a normal car, you have to pull a handle like a normal car, and open it by hand like a normal car. Whereas with the new one, all you have to do is this. Isn't that easy? When the car was debuted in 2011 in Geneva, they had to have certain things on the car that would differentiate it between its predecessors, the Agera range. Now, with the introduction of the Agera S, the main feature on that was the flex fuel system. This meant that it was the first hypercar to run on biofuels. It meant you could run it on E85, normal pump gas. I'm sure you could probably even run it on vodka. But that's where the Agera R came in. This also utilised the flex fuel system, but there were a bigger performance upgrade and certain other tweaks to the engines. Now what this meant was that it gives it a massive boost in power. Well, I say massive. On normal pump gas, you're getting around 1100 brake horsepower. With E85 in England, ultra expensive, in America, I'm not so sure, you're getting around 200 brake horsepower more to the engine. So that gives it, let's say, around 1350 brake horsepower. But the problem is, it's probably meaning you got 1350 pounds per mile in fuel, because this thing burns E85. Obviously, E85 is used for better efficiency. It means it does get a longer distance, but it does burn quicker. So if you're doing top speed runs, you're gonna burn through it. Now, I think it's about time we get on to the Regera. So the engine bay on the Regera, well, what's there to see? The first thing you're greeted by is one whopping great big battery pack. That is where the motor gets its power from. Now, the motor has 700 brake horsepower. The engine, the ICE, the internal combustion engine, produces 1100 brake horsepower. So technically, it produces 1800 brake horsepower. but to the wheels that produces around 1,500 brake horsepower. Now that propels this thing from 0 to 250 miles an hour back to 0 in the fastest time ever recorded for a production car. Now that is no small feat. So the engine bay, what is different? Well, because this is a more stylish car, some people may agree, some people may not, they've done certain things to the engine, and one of my favourite things is a little light bar just here, which means at night time when you open the back, you can see all the magnificent parts of the car. Now, one of the things I chose on this car was the gold emblems inside, but also every bolt of the engine and interior to be in a light gold. So when this is at night time and that light is on, the engine bay sparkles. And just on top of the brake lights, you see these Koenigsegg shields. Now, I didn't have those in gold because when I first saw them in the factory, well, they just looked so pretty. Now you also have this cutout here. This cutout is in fact a radiator for the cooling of the battery and the engine. And when the wing is down, this is blocked here, this little square. And when it comes up, obviously air flows straight into there. But some people are thinking, well, if you're driving along, the wing will be blocking airflow. No, because at 70 mile an hour, or I believe 70 mile an hour, the wing automatically comes up so it can produce cooling. And also, if it feels it needs more cooling, it can utilize any of its 8 radiators. That's right, 8. That's more radiators than I've probably got in my house. So, that is the engine bay. Obviously, there are numerous performance upgrades and different features to the Agera because it utilizes the free valve system. And I could go into all the technical details, but I just don't understand them. I don't understand how one man can come up with something, well, as ingenious as all things compiled into this square space here. It really is something remarkable. But one thing I can talk to you about is the interiors. So let's hop back to the Agera and talk about the interior and some of the interesting parts of that. So the Agera R interior, well, where do we begin? Now we have to remember that in 2011, infotainment wasn't the highest of importance for cars like this, hypercars. So the infotainment screen, well, what is there? There isn't much. It does connect to your phone, but because the car was downloaded and the software is sort of fixed in, it only connects to an iPhone 3GS or 4 with a certain software. And I got it to connect to my phone once, and the speakers don't work very well at all. And especially when the car is running, because it's so noisy, music is really not an option. The sat-nav, it doesn't work. Just doesn't work. The dashboard is very clear. Actually, I almost prefer this dashboard to the Regera dashboard because it's got a bit more sporty feel to it. But what it also has is a lot going on. The Regera, they've simplified the whole dashboard. They've made it so that you can clearly see the speed. The revs, well, they don't matter. But I've always found the revs to be a little bit harder to see on this. And thankfully, on the Regera, if you have any faults or if anything warning comes up, it comes to you up in words. It doesn't just throw an engine management light and go, there's something wrong with your car. Because we've had an engine management light come on in this, and it's been for silly reasons, like it might have a low tyre or something like that, and it tripped the TPMS gauge. But this really didn't matter. This car wasn't designed to be refined, to be comfortable, although it's not uncomfortable, but it's not exactly comfortable. So the seating, well, the seats are very huggy. They're very supportive. They're very around you. So it means that it does suit the driving style of this car. Obviously, you're not going for a cruise in this. Usually you're wide awake, filled with adrenaline, even just moving the car out of the garage. But you sort of wonder, would it be nicer to have a bit more of a comfortable seating? Well, they've obviously improved that in the RS as well, which is the newest Agera and the final Agera until they moved on to the Regera and eventually the Esco. So what else is different? The center console here, you have all of your controls on this circular dashboard here. The engine start-stop design is still the same, fun enough. They still use the micro holes, which means that when it's off, you can't see what the buttons do. And as soon as you switch on the ignition, all the lights come on. Something I really liked about Koenigsegg. The AC, well, don't get me started on the air conditioning on these. It's like an asthmatic hamster blowing through a straw. Now, I'm not exactly saying the Regera is good, but this is just terrible. This is just I mean, we took this to Croatia and you had to get out every 45 minutes and drench yourself in water because it was so hot. And you could take the roof off, but the amount of wind noise is deafening. So there was things that needed to be refined in the Agera R series, or the Agera series, and then they got to the Regera, and that is where luxury meets performance. Now, isn't that old-fashioned? That just felt like effort. If only I had a button to open it. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is actually the seating position and the head height. Now, because this seat had lacking of electronics and heated seats, it meant that the seating was lower down. It meant it was easier to get out of. And also, this block here, where the door latches to, I've always used that to help me get out. Now, getting out of this was never easy, but that car is hard. Now let me demonstrate getting out of this. So, 1 foot out, hand on here, and you push yourself out. Now I can't do that in that. Yeah, no, it's not the easiest to get in and out of. One of the big differences is the padding in these seats. The padding is obviously a lot higher because A, it's more comfortable, it's got more cushioning, it's got heated seats, and it's got electronic motors, which means ease of access should be easier, but the driving position makes it more comfortable, but getting in and out isn't. Now, once you're in, believe me, you're in. This thing really is refined to the next level. Now, I don't know whether it's because you've got blue Alcantara, which makes everything feel a little bit brighter and a little bit more modern, but it's just something about the interior of this. It's just perfect. You've got the center console here, which is just what you need it to be. It's not overcomplicated. It doesn't show you too much stuff. As a driver, you don't want to be seeing speed gauges and turbo gauges. You want to be seeing what's actually going on, or something simple like Apple CarPlay, what music, your map. And as featured in the last video, if you haven't seen that, go check it out. This has Apple CarPlay, the most useful thing in a modern day car. Now, because it's got the hydraulic system in it, which means that you can open and close the front, it makes things a bit easier because the front of those have never been the easiest to open, and especially not the back. The start-stop button, it's 1 press for the ignition on, 2 presses for the electric motor on, and you press it 1 more time when it's an electric motor with your foot on the brake, and that will start the engine. Now, the one thing that I've noticed on this is the strangest thing. Because it's got an electronic starter, as soon as you start it, it doesn't crank over and start, it's just on. And when you switch it off, it's just off. There's no turning over or winding down, it's on or it's off. So that's something that's a little bit more surreal. Now, air conditioning. The car features a very good system. Now, yes, okay, it's not perfect, but it is good. Look at that, didn't even have to move my arms. Isn't that a lot easier? Now, getting out, as mentioned, you've still got the door lock there, which you can put your hand on, but you can't quite reach it because, well, where the seat is. So you just sort of have to put your legs out first and then slide out like that, and then you're out. So yes, okay, it didn't look as difficult, but the ease of access, believe me, in person is a lot easier to get out of the Agera R, but this is more comfortable to seat in. So, you know, you've got to take the bad with the good. Let's talk about storage of the car. Now, hypercars, supercars, even some sports cars are notorious for not having very good storage space. Well, thankfully, the Koenigsegg has a little bit. Now, most people would say that, well, you've got the front boot, but remember, on a day like today, you're probably going to want the roof off. Now, the roof goes in there, which then means you've got nothing. Absolutely nothing. But with the roof on, luckily, you've got this space from about there to there. So a couple of soft bags, enough for maybe a weekend away to France, but generally, if you're going to go on a longer trip, you just have the Rolls-Royce following you. So let's go over to the Agera R and how much harder it is to access the front of this, because actually it's one thing that took a long time to try and remember how to open this. So how do you get access to the front? Well, you have to go passenger side, you open the door, and in here there is a handle So then you have to pull the handle and go to the front. So I have to somehow find this. Very hard to move. Now, because it's not electrically assisted, the front is not the easiest to move. So let's go round to the front and open that up. So the main difference between the Regera and the Agera in terms of opening the front is the fact that you have to lift the whole headlight assembly. So when we go to lift that, you know that the lever is just on the edge of that. You lift it and you have to sort of wait because, well, it's quite heavy and the gas struts have to do quite a bit. Now the storage isn't too dissimilar to the Regera, but the main difference is you've got these compartments here where there is radiators on that one. So it means that you've got a little bit of extra storage, so you could probably fit 4 bags instead of 2. But in there you've got your very useful roof case, which is the case that you put your roof into when you put it into there. And also you've got a little tool set in here, which means that at the middle of the night, if you ever need a torch, you've got the torch there and the key to access the roof. So now the important part, the difference in the noises. So let's start them up. So there you have it. A little bit more of a fun head-to-head review. Now, yes, it's not driven, but that's for a good reason. This car is no longer our car. We have sold it, but the owner very kindly left it with us for a few more days so we can do a head-to-head review like this. So, unfortunately, this probably will be the last time you see this, our old Agera R, but it won't be the last time you see this, our brand new Regera. At some point though, I guarantee we will have a head-to-head drag race of these two at some airfield at some point. But make sure to subscribe because there's going to be a lot more Regera content coming up. So, until then, I'll see you soon. Cheers.